Hello, everyone. Welcome to the very first event of the TPM Trail Seattle chapter. My name is Vrishali Bobhate. I am one of the organizers for today's event. And just to give you guys a little bit background about myself, I am currently working as a technical program manager with Expedia. And prior to this, I have worked as a TPM with Amazon and a healthcare IT company in Boston after completing my master's in computer science from the State University of New York at Binghamton. And I'm going to be your host for this Fireside Chat event where we're going to talk about tech leadership, which is a cornerstone for a successful TPM along with its functional capacities. So we have this renowned leader from the tech industry to talk about tech leadership through his lens of career. He is the SVP of Enterprise Business Services at Walmart. He was the CTO at Flex and has held leadership positions at Amazon. So please welcome David Glick.
Happy to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. All right. We can get started. David, do you want to say something before we get started?
I didn't think I was going to prepare, but it's okay. I always get nervous in these things, so I always try to tell a story to begin with. And maybe I'll talk about my first week as a TPM at Amazon. It was the week before Thanksgiving, and came in on a Tuesday morning, and the guy from facilities said, hey, we've got a great opportunity. We've built this new data center, but we didn't have any plan to migrate the website from the old data center to the new data center. And there's a hole in the roof. And what happened, this guy Rand was working late at night, and he was on the third floor of the Columbia building down on 2nd Avenue. And he looked up, and there was like a drip on his head. And he was like, huh. And drip, drip, drip. And he's like, oh man, the machine room's right above me. And so he runs up to the data center, and he finds that there's a big hole in the roof, and it's raining on the website. And the website was these NetApp toasters, NetApp file servers. And so he went down, he's a camper, so he had a tarp in his office. And he went and he put that over the website, and the rain was sluicing off of this into a bucket. And so I think it was actually Wednesday morning before Thanksgiving, the facilities guys came in and said, crisis is a terrible thing to waste. Let's move the website tomorrow night after dinner on Thanksgiving. We're like, well, is there a lot of traffic then? I'm like, nobody knows because we don't have any metrics. And so we all came in at 10 o'clock on Thanksgiving night and stayed up all night. And my job was to reload the website. And so we turned down toaster number 13, which was a file server, and see if the website reloaded. And if so, we'd take the box, take the server, run down to Doug's truck, drive it down to the street to the new data center and install it. Then they'd call and say, okay, try toaster 12. And we worked our way all the way back to toaster 1. And this took several hours, and it's 2 a.m. at this point. And we shut down toaster 1, and the website goes down. Like, well, what do we do? It's like, drive faster. And so we ran down the stairs with the file server, put it in Doug's truck, drove down 2nd Avenue, plugged it in. And by the time we got there, Rick Dalzell, who was our CTO, who had come from Walmart, he was on the phone, and he's like, guys, the website's down. We know, gotta go. And hung up on the CTO. And so that was my first experience, in a company, just joining out of grad school. And my job was actually to schedule everybody to come in from 10 p.m. to 3 a.m. shift. And then I thought they were really smart because they had a 3 a.m. to 8 a.m. shift to clean up. And so, TPMs do lots of different jobs, but one of them was to make sure that everybody was where they were when they were supposed to be. But we've come a long way since then, both at Amazon and even Flex and Walmart, doing bigger and better things.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a firefighting kind of an event on the very first day, right? And I think that brings me to asking you, can you share your experience working as a TPM at Amazon versus, working with TPMs now at Walmart? You've come a long way, right? So can you show some comparison?
Yeah, I mean, TPM is an interesting job title because it can mean lots of things to lots of different people. And, we know what a developer is, more or less. We more or less know what a product manager is. And TPM is somewhere in between. They have technical skills, but they can also drive projects. They can communicate and all those things. One of the one of the things that Kim Rackmiller was the first TPM at Amazon, and I was lucky enough to work for her, and she taught me a lot of things. But one of them was some TPMs are like assistant managers, and they're sort of, oh, we're going to assign tasks to people, and they may have 10 projects they're working on at a time. And Kim said, not my TPMs. I have 5 TPMs. What are the 5 most important projects at the company? And and anything 6 and below, you guys have to figure out yourself. But my people are so important that we're going to work on only the 5 biggest projects at the company. And so that's what I think of as a TPM is, I think we'll get later into single-threaded leader, but someone whose full-time job, they get up every morning thinking about delivering the project. They go to bed every night thinking about delivering the project. And sometimes, as I said before, I was a coordinator in my first job. That's not what we want. We want the TPMs to walk down the halls and you can hear them coming. Oh, I better get my act together, and because they're going to hold me accountable. And so the TPM's job is to deliver on schedule, under budget, the right product for the company. And so that's what I think of as a sort of capital T TPM. I think both at Amazon and Walmart and Flex and probably every other company, there's a variety of people doing TPME stuff. And some are this big time, delivering the biggest projects. And some are like, oh, I'm coordinating scrums and things like that. And so if you're a TPM, I would try to migrate from, hey, we're doing tasks where we have lots of different things, to how can I be single-threaded on the most important things for the company, because that's where you can add a ton of value.
You spoke about TPMs at Amazon, and you're working with TPMs at Walmart.
Yeah.
You are in a very, very senior leadership position at the moment, right? So what inspired you to pursue a career in tech leadership, and how has your journey evolved from your days back in Amazon to now in Walmart?
Yeah, so I had actually never heard of the job of a project manager or a TPM when I left grad school. So I had finished grad school at University of North Carolina. My wife got a postdoc in Seattle, so we moved out here. We said, we're either going to go to Seattle, San Francisco, or Boston. Wherever my wife finds a job, we will go there. And I was not a very good physicist, and so I'm going to get out of this, and we'll figure something out. And so I did a lot of informational interviewing, and I met a guy who was like, we lived in my buddy's basement. He was a school teacher, and he introduced us to a friend of a friend who was at AT&T as a TPM. And he taught me there's this thing called project management. And so I updated my resume and said project manager for my thesis project. And I was able to get hired at Amazon, not having a CS degree, which is pretty uncommon, especially nowadays. At small companies, you can make the role fit the person. Now this looks like a duck, this quacks like a duck. If you're neither fish nor fowl, it's very hard, but sometimes you can get into a company as a TPM. Anyway, so I did TPM, then systems engineering, then quality deployment and support, and everything except for software development. And Kim sat me down and said, hey, the world's moving away from infrastructure. Everybody's going to use AWS, and deployment, everybody's going to deploy their own stuff. And people have seen what's gone from one quality engineer to every 3 engineers at Microsoft back in the day, to almost no quality engineer. So this is a dying field you're in. So you better move to software, and you're not an engineer. So I don't know if there's a future for you at Amazon or in the industry. And Suresh Kumar, who's now my boss at Walmart, he's like, hey, I have lots of people who can write code. I need people who can get stuff done. So come over and I'll teach you how to be a software manager. And so I moved over and went from managing a team of about 50 people outside of software to managing 3 people in a software team. And that quickly grew from 3 people to 10 people to 50 people. And now it's 7,000 people. But that's kind of a non-traditional way to get into software development and leadership, especially in these times, because everybody's you have to have a CS degree, you have to have been an engineer at a big company before you can be a manager. And so I feel lucky that I'm sort of the exception to the rule.
That's amazing. I think you also spoke about single-threaded leadership, right? Mm-hmm. So would you like to share some of the key lessons that are important for effective tech leadership?
Yeah, we hired a consultant. I can't believe I'm saying that, but we hired a consultant. His name was Steve McConnell, who was a longtime Microsoft guy. He wrote Code Complete. I don't know if anybody remembers that. But the thesis was that the leading indicator of finishing a project is actually people working on that project. And we hired him because we're like, we can't deliver anything with big projects. And this was, we were launching like the seller business. And he came in and he had us fill out timesheets for the engineers. And they didn't love it. But we like to spend 5 minutes at the end of the week saying, what did you work on this week? And so after a month of that, came back and it's like, there was a TPM who thought there were 5 people working on their project. And it turns out one of them was out sick. One of them got called into a Sev1 ticket. Another one was fixing a bug for their buddy. And so it turns out 0 of those 5 people were working on the project. And he's like, why are we not making progress? And so like good TPMs are the ones who, like, we'll talk about single-threaded leadership. They get up every morning thinking about the project. They go to bed every night thinking about the project. And like, I don't know, I'm going to say this, but I might get in trouble. They're either going to be fired or promoted based on the outcome of that project. But like their success is deeply tied to the success of the project. Whereas I have 10 goals at the Suresh level, I've got 100 goals at my level and so on. And if I do 9 of the 10 goals at the Suresh level and we deliver those, I'm probably going to get a good score, good rating. But that one is really important. And so the sort of origin story of the single-threaded leader was what I heard, was we were working on a project called European Fulfillment Network. And for years, it didn't go anywhere. And so there was a meeting and the CEO said, who is the most senior person who's single-threaded on this project? The VP of Europe raised his hand and said, I am. Like, well, aren't you running all of Europe? Like, yeah. He's like, okay, then you're not single-threaded. So tell me again, I asked the same question, who is the most senior person? And a director raised their hand. He's like, well, aren't you running all of jewelry and watches? Yeah. Okay, so you're not single-threaded. And so they went down to sort of a relatively junior product manager who was the only person who was single-threaded on this project. And the CEO said, I have diagnosed your problem. I want a director-level person single-threaded on this project tomorrow. And all of a sudden, things started moving. There's a guy named Alex Udis, got promoted to VP because he delivered the project. And so that's the idea of single-threadedness, is that person, if his or her career depends on the delivery of this project, is going to make sure that of those 5 people, they're all working on that project, not 0 of 5 are working on them. And so, we can call this an Amazon thing or not an Amazon thing, but like the idea of single-threaded leaders, and I think Steve Jobs talked about this as well, and Elon talks about it. We don't want multitaskers. In the 80s, when I was growing up, everybody was like, oh, we want people great at multitasking. No, we want unitaskers. And you can make serial unitaskers, but like put something to bed, go down to the next thing, put it to bed, go down to the next thing, put it to bed. And the last thing I'll say is I just hired a guy, and when he joined, he said, as long as I have a good principal engineer and a good TPM, I can do anything. And so, getting, as leaders, it's our job, first of all, to build strong teams, and second of all, to bring clarity and focus to our teams. And people thirst for decision-making, and they thirst for clarity. And if you can get people marching in the same direction, you can conquer the world. And that's what TPM's job is, first and foremost.
Is amazing. I'm just trying to absorb the single-threaded leadership thought, because it is such an important quality, right, to deliver, especially projects which are very important for an organization and tend to have very high visibility, right? I think that brings me to the next question, and that is, what are the key qualities that you would see in a TPM, and that will basically help them grow in leadership roles?
I think this idea of focus, being organized, being diligent, being focused are all important, even more than being technical. Technical helps. I said throughout my career, I would consider myself sort of medium successful. But if I was a little more technical, I would have been a little more effective. And like every year, less and less over time, because I've got layers upon layers of people who are more technical than me now. But over time, it's been, if I was just a little more technical, I would have seen around the corner. I would have been more effective. And so having the technical chops as a TPM is super important, but also sort of focus and like, I think the ability to call people out and say, hey, this is not going well, and speak truth to power, both in sending status upwards, but also talking to the team, and don't shy away from conflict. It's your job. The end all be all is it's your job to deliver the project on time. Accountability, bringing accountability to the teams, and that sometimes means escalation. It sometimes means sitting down and having a hard conversation. And you know, I do think technical skills are important, but potentially secondary to those other things.
Gotcha. So, reflecting on your journey, you've worked in many leadership roles. You've worked on immense number of projects so far, right? Can you tell us about some of the challenges that you faced? Some interesting challenges. I'm sure you've faced like multiple of them, but something that comes to your mind in terms of challenges, and how did you overcome those challenges?
Let me think. I mean, one thing that I remember, we had a program called, we had a program called competitive monitoring. And it was, looking at what our competitors were doing. And I won't go into any more detail than that, but I got involved, and I was told, the guy who's managing this, great engineer, maybe not a great manager, and like, I need you to help him get this program on track because it's got super high visibility. And the first thing I did, I sat down with his calendar, and he was doing like 20 hours of interviews every week. And so again, he wasn't actually working on making this thing better. It was funny, we had a meeting, and he's like, yeah, we're trying to run this thing once every 24 hours, but it takes us 36 hours to run it. Like, well, maybe we should work on that and see if the frequency of running needs to be longer than the period that it runs. And so it was like, okay, let's stop doing whatever else we're doing and improve the performance so that we can run this thing every day and it runs. And so getting down to like the simple things, and you've heard of suspension of disbelief. I think I learned that in sort of acting or drama class, right? It's like when you go to a movie, you have to suspend disbelief. If you go to the X-Men or whatever, we don't want TPMs to suspend disbelief, right? They're like, hey, this looks wrong. Let me dig into that and figure out. And often it's simple changes. And it's also empowering the engineers or the product or project team that you're working with to say, hey, what is it? Why are you doing what you're doing? Well, management said to. I was just talking to someone the other day. We talking about this? Anyway, management won't let us do this. And I actually took over a team in fulfillment technology, and they're like, senior management won't let us build good software, and senior manager doesn't give us time to do this. And I was like scratching my head because my boss was the head of operations, and he never told me anything except for like, there's one project you have to deliver, but I had 250 people on the team. I'm like, who is this senior management of which you speak? And I was with the team, and it turned out it was me. That like, it wasn't Dave, because he was just telling me what to do. And it wasn't below because nobody was making, so it must have been me, or it must have been my role. And so I sat with the team and said, okay, let's clear the board. If you believe that senior management, which is me, is telling you that you don't have time to write good software, or you don't have time to do the right thing, or you don't have time to clear your tech debt, please come to my office and we will have a conversation about this. Anytime, if you think whatever you're spending your time on is dumb, please come to my office and we will talk about it. And maybe we'll say, well, we're implementing robots and that's the most important thing, and so you have to do these things. We're going to leave some tech debt behind and so on. But for the most part, I'd rather have you build the right thing and have it take a little longer. And it actually turns out not to take longer to do the right thing. And we actually never had people come to my office and say that. But the empowerment that it gave people to say, oh, I should not do stupid things, right? I should question what I'm doing and don't think senior management is making me do this. That's a theme, whether you're in Walmart or Flex or Amazon. Like, people want to have agency. People want to do a good job of their job. People want to be empowered to do the good job of their job. People look to us, senior management, to empower them, to give them agency, to make decisions, to bring clarity, to bring focus. And if we can do that, people will do amazing things.
Right. So it definitely sounds like, balancing innovation within teams and ensuring that there is alignment with broader business objectives is very, very challenging, right? So, when you are in this position that you are right now, how do you foster innovation and also make sure that you are aligning with the broader business objectives as well?
Yeah, it's a great question. What I found is mostly the people who do stuff know what they need to do, and they feel disempowered in some fashion. And so my job is to challenge them to say, why don't we make a 50% improvement in cost rather than a 20% improvement? Well, every year we actually do 10%, so 20% is a lot. Like, oh, so it's impossible to do 50%? Oh, no, we know exactly what we need to do 50%, but nobody listens to us. Like, great. How many engineers, and this is the operations team, how many engineers are working with you on this? None. Well, don't we have the operations and engineering team sitting together in the org so that they can help you? Oh, they haven't. Okay, well, let's put half a dozen engineers on this problem, and we can get hyperscale pretty quickly, and we can make all those changes that you've wanted to make. Oh, who approved that? Well, I approved it. Well, don't you have to get permission? No, go do the thing. And if someone tells you you're doing the wrong thing or they want you to work on something else, just come back and talk to me. And so the feedback I get is being decisive, bringing clarity and focus is what people need. Because I had an engineer, I was like, Praneet, why is this taking so long? It's not rocket science. He said, Dave, most software development is not rocket science. And so actually writing code is the easiest part of the job. It's figuring out what code you want to write, get everybody to buy into it, and making sure that everybody agrees. And so that's part of the idea of single-threaded leadership is you have one person who has decision rights and is responsible to get everybody marching in the same direction. And so I would encourage everybody, whether TPM or manager or senior management, how do you get people marching in the same direction? And how do you do it with as few people in the decision as possible? How do you get decision rights either for you or a small group of people so that you don't have meetings where 20 or 30 people are weighing in, or you're going to one meeting and someone says this, and one meeting is saying this, and one meeting is saying this.
Amazing. I think that, like you said, right, engineers know what they need to do. But then when you are in a leadership position, right, how do you make sure that you have X number of business goals, and then you also have to gather alignment, technical alignment to achieve these business goals, right? Is there some sort of strategy that you implement to make that happen?
Yeah, I mean, there's a famous story about Toyota. They never did cost-benefit analysis when they had defects. They said any defect that is in the production line, we're going to pull the ending cord and we're going to fix it. We're not going to spend a bunch of time figuring out how often it happens or how much it costs, or the benefits outweigh the cost. We're just going to fix it. That was always a very compelling story to me. And so I often will be like, man, this is broken. Let's pull our best engineers and have them go work on this thing. And we can, days, weeks, we can get something done where it would have taken months or quarters to do it without. And I'm trying to think of a time when that's blown back on me. And I can't think of one. Every time, we have OKRs, we have goals, we have managers who feel like they're not allowed to do the right thing because the product managers own their roadmap and the engineering people are disempowered. My point of view is every morning we should get up and do what's right. Let's do what's right for the customer. Let's do what's right for the associate. Let's do what's right for the engineers and the team. And if we do that every day, and now we don't want to jerk people around every day, but broadly, I get frustrated by annual goals, right? Because we reserved the right to be smarter in February than we were last November. And we reserve the right in September to be smarter than we were last November. And so if we do what's right every day for our associates, customers, and engineers, I think things work out.
I think you are truly living the single-threaded leadership principle in and out. um, I think the next question that I have for you is, you have held multiple VP and director level positions in your career, right? And you've definitely navigated the complexities of cross-functional collaboration and stakeholder management, right? Can you share some insights as to how would you navigate those effectively?
Um, I say I've always got two solutions for any problem. The first is simplify. Second is hire. And so almost always we complexify things. And it's, the TPM's job is stay on the critical path. Like there's all kinds of stuff that people are going to reach, throw at you. But like, what is the critical path? And let's stay on that. And so that's always worked. And that's a matter of simplification. Yeah. And do we need these bells and whistles, or like, what is the fundamental concept? And again, I'll go back to Elon saying, the only laws we can't break are the laws of physics. And everything else is flexible. And as a physicist, I appreciate that. And this first principle is thinking of like, how do we get the customer to click a button and pay us money and take that in and then put something in a box and send it to the customer? And that's an overgeneralization, but broadly, that's our jobs, right? Get customers to come to our website or to our stores and to pay us to take goods away. And so start with that as first principles, and then we can put commentary around it. And the second thing is hiring great people. If we find that something's not going well, going back to like, who is the person who is working on it? Is anybody single-threaded on it? If the answer is no, like a decision tree. If no, put someone who's single-threaded on it. If yes, are they senior enough? Okay. If no, get someone more senior. And so it's a pretty simple and non-domain specific way of looking at things. Be operationally excellent, hire great people, stop doing stuff that we shouldn't be doing, and that actually creates space to do all the things we should do. And it seems to work.
Just a follow-up question to that, I think we spoke about innovation earlier, and then now we spoke about simplification. Have there been any times when you had to choose between okay, either innovate or simplify, or is it like always both?
I've never been much of an innovator. I'm a simplifier. Like if you say invent and simplify, there are lots of inventors. Like we love inventors, we love big thinkers. But then they're grinders. I'm a grinder. And once I learned that that's who I am, it made everything simpler. It's like, look, I have opinions on whether this is the right thing to do. But broadly, if the CEO says or the CTO says we're marching this direction, I used to, as I was younger, I don't think that's the right direction. But then my life got very simple. And I was like, look, in the absence of direction from above, I'm going to create direction. I'm going to make my own direction. But if there's direction from above, my life is much simpler if I do the thing that I'm being told to do. Then I can go back to doing what I want to do. And so one of my superpowers is when we get direction from the CEO or the CTO or whoever, I can operationalize that direction. Yeah. And it turns out that like bosses love people who take problems off of their plate, and they love people less who put problems on their plate. So I've always tried to be someone who takes problems off of my boss's plate. And he says, hey, I need you to go hire principal engineers. Great, done. Hey, this thing's broken. We're getting a lot of flack on this. Go fix it. Done. And then, 98% of my time, I get to do what I want and I get to give direction to the team. When I used to fight with my boss over whether those were the right thing, whether their priorities were the right thing, I lost all the ability to do the things I wanted because they were frustrated that I wasn't listening. And so that was one of the things that as I got to be more senior, I realized I had more control. And if I make sure and make my boss's life easier and solve problems for him or her, I can go do almost whatever I want after that.
That makes so much sense for people at every role for that matter, yeah. Right? Would you be able to share like a particularly challenging project or an initiative? Nothing under the NDA, but just we want to understand what are some of the key strategies that you implemented to successfully drive it?
let's see. One of the things that we found is lots of people are good at writing software, but oftentimes, like the software team will launch something, the users, and my history is not consumer for the most part. It's enterprise software for buyers or for associates in the warehouse, or now I run payroll and some other things. Like getting people to use your software is actually much harder than actually writing software. And so we had this idea of automation, adoption, and audit. And it's like, write the software, that's automation. And then adoption is like getting people to use it. And when you're automating things that people do every day, they have a lot of emotion around that. Because they're like, what am I going to do? Well, you can do higher level tasks, but I've done this for a long time. And so being able to convince people that your software can do the job and make their lives easier and make the company better. And actually, I was the technical advisor or chief of staff to our SVP of International. And we were in Germany. And every year we'd go to Germany and say, you need to use our forecasting and ordering system. And the Germans would write a beautiful 7-page document on all the reasons why our system didn't work. And so we had this stalemate for years. And so I was over there and we read a paper and they're like, yeah, we can't do this because, our in-stock rates are going to go down or our inventory levels are going to go up. And we're going to be in trouble. Diego's going to yell at us. Diego is the SVP. And so I had Diego in the room with me and I said, Diego, if we implement this thing and bad things happen, who are you going to yell at? He's like, you, Dave. And so that released all the tension from these folks who are worried about, oh, what if the software doesn't work as well as we do, then we're going to get in trouble. And then so I said, Monday, we're going to start automated ordering in books, music, video. And Monday, we started, we had 13 tickets that were filed, 13 tickets that were fixed, and in-stock rates went up, inventory levels down, sales went up, we were able to all the things. And then the consumer electronics team was like, oh, Dave, you don't understand. Consumer electronics is hard. Like books, music, video is easy. Okay, you guys get 1 month. And so I'm going to come back in 4 weeks and we're going to turn this thing on. So, a month later, they did whatever prep they were doing, and then we turned on auto ordering, and everything worked. And they came back another couple of weeks, and they had this big document that they'd written about, we're ordering deeper, we're ordering more often, our vendor lead times are coming down because we're ordering more often, we can lower our in-stock levels, our in-stock rates are everything was better. And then I came back to the US, I'm like, hey, the Europeans are kicking your butts. And that was in a different org, that was in someone else's org, and he's like, why is Diego beating me? And so then the US sort of took on that whole same thing. And so a lot of the magic wasn't in writing software, not like people who write software are super smart, much smarter than me, and do a great job for us, and love those folks. But getting the complete process of not just automation, but adoption and audit was the trick. And that was something I found myself to be very good at. And again, it's not fact-based, it's not data-based. It's very emotionally tied when you're talking about bringing people in to say, hey, we're going to automate these things that you've done. Anyway, so that was a way to release a lot of the tension, and ended up, all those ordering systems are running today.
That's amazing. So you've spoken about your project, your early days as a TPM, and now that you are at the SVP level, navigating throughout your journey. I think one very, very important question that I want to ask is, what is the advice that you would offer to aspiring leaders, especially people who want to make an impact in the tech industry, and people who want to advance into leadership positions? So is there something, some sort of advice that you would want to share with such people?
Yeah, this woman, Kim Rackmiller, who was my boss and early TPM, shared this framework with me: product, process, people. So when you're a junior engineer or junior TPM, all you have to produce is the product. When you're sleeping, you're completely unleveraged, right? Like if you're not typing on the keyboard, if you're not checking in code as a junior engineer, you're unleveraged. As you get to be a senior engineer, first line manager, second line manager, you're working on processes. Like, how do we clean up our ticket queue? how do we do roadmap planning, performance reviews. All of these things are processes. And so you're focused on that. And then as you get more senior, it's about people. And so I spend most of my time figuring out, who are we going to hire? Where do we need to move people or add people to make things go? Where are our single-threaded leaders? Assessing folks, who are we betting on? What's our succession planning? And so it's sort of a continuum from product, like typing on the keyboard, checking in code, all the way to putting people in the right places to build the processes so that the engineers who are checking in code can be the most productive. So that's one way to think about it. But if you're early starting in your career, like deliver important stuff. One of the LinkedIn posts I wrote was like solve.problems.for.your.boss, period, exclamation point. Like in the absence of knowing what to do, figure out what your boss's biggest problem is and solve that. And over time, you'll get to know what your customer's biggest problems are, and you'll have opinions on what are the most important things. But like, it's not a bad place to start by like, cleaning your boss's plate.
On the process and people.
Yes.
That's the career trajectory, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. I think that's all the questions from my end. And thank you for sharing your experiences and your journey. I'm sure everybody sitting over here and people who have joined us online have learned a lot through the stories that you shared and the answers that you gave on this event. I think it is now time for audience interaction. We would like to take questions from the folks sitting over here and the folks who are online, and David can go ahead and try to answer those.
Can I go?
Yeah.
Sure. So Dave, you were one of the first few TPMs at Amazon when the role was TPPM. Can you tell us about the evolution of the TPPM role into TPM and other?
I was actually never had a T by my name. They were like, you're a little T TPM because I didn't have a computer science degree. But yeah, TPM is one of these roles that is so like amorphous. And it's like, oh, well, I'm not just a technical program manager. I'm a technical project and program manager. What's the difference? I don't know. And then you've got product manager technical, which is like a whole nother thing. And I don't think there's necessarily like a linear evolution of these roles, but it is a little bit of a catch-all. So if I were a TPM and that was my title, I would go try to find the biggest project I can find and work on that and only that. That doesn't exactly answer your question, but it's hard. And I remember thinking my offer letter said junior project manager on it. And so it was a project manager. And then when TPM was technical project manager, and then, it became technical program manager. I was like, why? I learned that like 2 years ago that TPM means technical program manager, not project manager. And then I worked with a lot of product managers. That's program stuff. We don't do that. And I was like, what? Well, isn't your job to deliver your product? And so I always, never really got what the right thing is. But the thing I've got in my head is both a product manager and a TPM, their job is to ideate, prioritize, and execute. And product managers, maybe 60% ideate, 30% prioritize, 10% execute, or something. Whereas a TPM is maybe 10% ideate, 30% prioritize, and 60% execute. And so I'm a big fan of execution. And so that's why I have this, my heart is very closely tied to TPMs.
So I think you had a question, right?
So I've worked largely in organizations where TPMs were on a separate group functionally, and you matrixed across and had a matrix team. And I don't know if you've been in that type of organization. Can you speak to influence without authority when everybody on your project does not report to you?
Yeah, I mean that's the magic, right?
That's right.
So there's different models, and so like I said, Kim had 5 TPMs, and she reported directly to the CTO, Rick. And so like when Kim's people were there, everybody knew that there was a direct line from from the TPM to Kim to Rick. And so she never had any problems like that. If you've got it sort of at lower levels, the problem with having a centralized TPM group is it turns into a PMO. Program management office, project I don't even know what PMO means, but it's something management office. And it's a bunch of people keeping track of what everybody else is doing. And we'd rather have people who are doing than keeping track of doing. And now in any big bureaucracy, you're going to have some mechanisms for keeping track of things. And I ended up with a PMO. I've ended up with PMOs many times, and I traditionally try to blow them up as quickly as possible and put the TPMs as close to the engineers they're working with as possible in the org chart. That has downsides too, because then they could end up being like assistant managers rather than having the wherewithal and the authority to be broadly big. So anyway, remind me what the question was again.
Influence without authority.
Oh yeah.
Right. I mean,
yeah.
You're driving execution.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily report to you, but you still are accountable, and you've got to make things happen. I'm just curious if you had any skill sets, mindsets, or tool sets.
Yeah. My first job actually, I was 2 or 3 months in at Amazon. I was down packing books overnight because I got sent to the warehouse because I wasn't mission critical over Christmas, and I got pulled aside at 3 a.m. and they're like, "Okay, you're going to launch our new fulfillment center in February." They call them distribution centers back then in Fernley, Nevada. And I didn't know anything about anything, but they're like, "Okay, make sure we buy these things and make sure this is put together a schedule and drive it." And so I was like, "Well, I better go down to Nevada and like be there on site." And so you get credibility by being at the Gemba, right? You have to be there. You're up all night with the team. I found that being in the office, in the warehouse at 6 a.m. and leaving at 8 p.m., I was there before the contractors, like the construction guys came, and I was there after everybody left. So that's one way of doing this. I also had the woman, her name is Ellen, who ran DC Software back then, Distribution Center Software. Go down there, like God herself put you in charge and tell people what to do. And that was giving me agency. I'm like, okay, I don't know who's who, but Ellen seems pretty important. And she told me I'm in charge. And so I'm going to go start telling people what to do. I published a daily status report. It was called the Fernley Times. And it was written sort of as a newsletter and very informally because I didn't really have any TPM skills, nor any engineering skills, nor any skills at all. But my boss was like, hey, send a daily update. But one of the pieces of magic there is if you send regular status reports, it's not good news or bad news. It's just news. And so whether it's daily or usually it's weekly, Friday afternoon, the VP sits down and says, I'm going to read all what's going on, and I'm going to be used to and being consistent, like frequent, consistent, concise, right? Let me figure out in one paragraph what I need to know. And it gives people confidence because trust decays over time. Like if we sit down Monday afternoon and we're like, okay, we're going this way. We're like, okay, we feel good. And then haven't heard anything in a week. Are we really going in that direction? It's probably not going well. And then you haven't heard anything in 3 weeks. Like, oh, this must be broken. And so having this consistent, concise feedback on frequency is super important. In addition, when they come and say, oh, you didn't do this, you can be like, look, I've been sending these status reports for the last 12 weeks, and they all say this is busted. And it was busted. And so it's not really CYA, but it does give you sort of a baseline and a foundation of having a conversation. And so that is a tool, and escalation is a tool. And Kim used to say, escalation isn't failure, escalation is just a tool. And I think actually Jeff Bezos was on Lex Friedman's podcast, and he's like, yeah, escalation's good. Like we can fight over, a bunch of junior people fighting over things for weeks. And if you just come talk to me, I'll tell you what the answer is, and you can go about your business. And so those are all tools for a TPM, but they have to have the respect, right? If you're not respected, everybody won't listen. And so how do you get respect? You're there all the time, right? You're there, I was, one of the ways I earned respect is I was on every Sev1 ticket for years in the fulfillment center space. Like I was always there in the middle of the night, and the engineers knew I was there. And I didn't always know almost never knew the solution, but I was like, oh, I'll page this person in for you. Or then, after 6 months, I was like, oh, this looks like this thing that happened 5 months ago. Why don't we try that? Like, oh, the TPM, no, he actually, the manager figured something out. And so those little things, being in the Gemba, building relationships with the people you're working with, helps a ton and just takes the friction out of the system.
I really like your focus on execution. It's like you're passionate about this, impress a lot, but we always have limited resources, and we have to compromise. How do you compromise? How do you set priorities when we need to move fast? We need to deliver new product, but at the same time we need to fix a bunch of old bugs that hurts customer satisfaction, and we just need to do this.
Yeah, I mean, what I found is good news is when you come in new, you get some leeway, right? And one of the guys who worked for me, a guy named Mike Bundy, used to say, and he was a TPM. First thing we do is declare bankruptcy. From whatever our predecessors had committed to, we're going to declare bankruptcy and say, look, we got to look at this whole thing again. And what I found is when you focus on operational excellence, continuous deployment, testing, all those things, you get it for free. You spend a few weeks or a few months on making things better, fixing the bugs, so you're not on tickets all the time. You're not being pulled on. That pays for itself. The ROIC, the time it pays back is pretty short. And so I was telling folks, yeah, I want you to do both, which is classic manager stuff. But one of the guys who worked for me came back and said, we did do both because we focused on operations first. And that gave us the time we needed to clean up our house. And we call it fix the foundation. And so in my team at Walmart, we have lots of stuff that we implemented, some by consultants and some varying business requirements, and people implemented something and then moved on. And we have a bucket of invent. Is that what it's called? Or new stuff, and then sustain. And I'm, again, not thinking about the cost benefit. Someone's going to be angry, but I'm telling the team, focus on fixing the foundation. And if we do that, with big teams, these teams are hundreds or thousands of people. If you fix the foundation and you get a 2% increase on 1,000 people, what's that, 28 people? If you get a 10% increase, that's 100 engineers that can go do other things. So that's always been my strategy. Anytime you come in someplace new, declare bankruptcy, focused on operations, and things work themselves out. And I'm trying to think of a time when someone was like, nope, that's not the right thing. And again, I'll go back to fulfillment tech. In 2012, we bought a company makes robots. And my boss was like, we burned the ships. You better make sure that our robots work by Christmas time. And so that one, I was like, okay, how many engineers am I going to spend on that? I'm going to put 25 engineers on that. And I have 225 more engineers to do with what I want to do, quote, the right thing. You'll find, I'll digress a little bit. The first few weeks I was on that team, we'd have these Sev 1 outages. What happened? Oh, that's legacy code. What do you mean? What is legacy code? And I'm like, oh, that was written before we got here. Well, I was involved with this 15 years ago, and I knew those guys. Those guys were good engineers. They wrote good code. But it came down to, oh, it's C++, and none of us know how to code in C++, because we're all Java developers. Oh, now we're at the root cause of the problem. Now we can start addressing it. And so getting down to what are the things that are actually blocking, what are perceived constraints versus real constraints? This is something that I'm going to keep going if that's okay.
Sure.
I answered your question, hopefully, and then some.
Yes.
But as we get more senior, we look at all these things that we do and don't control. And what you find is as you're more senior, you control more and more. And you have perceived constraints and real constraints. And you should go catalog all the constraints that you have and determine if they're perceived or real. And if senior management won't let us do whatever, that's probably a perceived constraint. And so you should push on the edges of that constraint.
We do have one question from the online
okay,
audience.
Let's do the audience. Yeah.
Move ahead. So they're asking with regards to single-threaded leadership, the entire program depends on the capacity and capability of one leader that does not slow down the process.
So the concern,
So the concern is that, does it not slow down the process? And secondly, what they're asking is, with one leader decision making, will it not limit the diverse perspectives, or if other people have like creative solutions, would it not limit those as well?
yeah. So one of the things that I've seen work, and this is a guy who's a designer who taught me this: first diverge, then converge. So you're the single-threaded leader on this thing. Your first job is to figure out what the right thing is. That's diverge. Go look for diverse viewpoints, get everybody in a room, get everybody's input. But then you decide. You say, we have taken in diverse perspectives, which we love, but now we've made a decision and we're marching north. And you want to check in with people and say, is north still the right direction? And in fact, the best TPMs are like talking to their product counterparts every day. Like, oh, we have a question over this. Do you want this button here? Do you want this button here? And so you have this continuous feedback loop. And so it's not nobody else gets to decide. So single-threaded means I am the leader. I'm only working on one thing and only one thing. It doesn't mean nobody else can work on it. It just means that I'm focused on one thing. And my job is to take it over the goal line, spike the ball, and go to Disneyland.
Sounds good. Somebody else also had a question.
Yeah, thank you. So Dave, I just want to know your perspective on like the future of TPM as a role. Like some of the companies have chosen to eliminate this role in like last year layoffs, particularly Facebook and Google. Do you still see engineering management and TPM will remain separate, or will these converge at some point, at least like the way you see it?
Yeah, I mean, you can have, TPM is one of those things where it's like, oh, there's a bunch of administrative stuff, so let's hire somebody to do that. And you can have TPM proliferation. And so what I've tried to do at Walmart is look at ratios, senior engineer to junior engineer ratios, and TPM or product manager to engineers. And at, probably, one TPM for 10 engineers is one way to think about it. Or you can say like, look, we have 5 S-team goals or EC goals. So we need 5 TPMs. But like, it should be you should very judiciously hire this. And if you're not having oversight, you get proliferation. And that's exactly what we've seen in all the big tech companies. And the other thing is, part of that proliferation is a bunch of junior TPMs. What you want is a small number of very senior, capable leaders who can drive things forward. And the feedback I've gotten at Walmart is like, you need to hire less people in more senior roles, and that's what I'm executing on.
All right, we can take like one last question. I think you have one.
Wait, can we go to her? I'll talk to you later, but
I had a couple of questions, but I think you already answered one. So I'll just go with, can you give an example of a project that did not go so well or failed? How did you handle it?
I'm trying to think. It's not whether something succeeded or not. It's, have we succeeded yet? I mean, one of the most important, like, I always thought persistence and resilience were the 2 most important attributes to succeeding. And we had the HR team who did a multi-year study, and they came up with like tenacity and grit being the most important things. I'm like, isn't that persistence and resilience? You didn't have to pay any consultants or have a 2-year-long project to figure that out. I'm trying to think. I had a project where we were doing global selling. We were trying to list products all over the world. Like every product that was listed in the US should be listed everywhere, sort of the top line of it. And we drove that. We actually made some good progress, and we'd done some pretty interesting stuff. And then we went to a meeting with the CEO and his staff, and like, did not go well. He was like, you're doing what you can do instead of what you should do. And it basically took all the air out of me. And and then I lost all credibility because I was like going and pounding on people to do these things. And then the CEO tells you you're doing all the wrong things. And so you lose backing from your leadership. So very seldom do things go poorly because of technical problems. They're from like an institutional will. Do we have, there was a book called Peopleware. Does anybody old enough to remember Peopleware? A few people. And I never read it, but I bought it for my lead engineer. And the thesis was like, think about the last project that didn't go well. Was it because you didn't have the right hardware? No. Was it because you couldn't write the right software? No. It was about people. About you couldn't get everybody moving in the same direction, or you didn't have the credibility, or you didn't have the backing. And so those are the times when I haven't succeeded. And I end up like dumping that organization, going back to something that I was good at, because it was just, it took all the wind out of my sails. And it's fun to be working on something when you've got support. It's not so fun when people are leaving you.
Just one last question from you, and then
Yeah, I'm happy to keep talking, but you can.
Are you okay?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
As a business leader or as a program leader, when you talked a little bit about project priorities, like make sure you're staffing TPMs for your S-team goals or 5 important things. But when you come to the next list of goals, let's say I, as a leader, have inherited 15 goals. How should I think about staffing a technical PM for a project versus a non-technical PM? Because TPMs are super expensive, and we want them to be engaged with the impact that they're driving.
Interesting. I don't like generally. I think I have people who have the title program manager in my org right now. Broadly, I haven't in the past. So either you're a product manager, you're an engineer, or you're a technical program manager. Yeah, and now I have program managers, and some of those things. And program managers are generally, I'll make a generalization, which is always bad, but often like doing things to keep the business running. TPMs, in my opinion, and this is not because it's a big T or a little t, but just how I think of TPMs is they're moving you from point A to point B. They're transformational. Program managers, sometimes they're doing that, but often they're running the day-to-day business, which is fine. It's a reasonable thing to do. But and we need lots of operators. Like we want to run the business day to day. It's important. And so, again, that's my buddy who built the Amazon Go store, you may know, some of you may know, he's like, look, we all have our brand. Dave, your brand is you mind the store. Like I'm out here doing whiz bang stuff, and that's fun. And he's the inventor of the Invent and Simplify. I'm watching the store. And so program managers watch the store. Can we do it with software instead of people? That's one of the questions. Partly because people are expensive, partly because people provide latency, partly because people are great defect handlers, but also great defect injectors. And so if you look at any process and say, where are defects being injected, it's almost always where people are touching it. Now, computers can inject defects super fast, right? And so like if a computer starts injecting defects into the system, like we had a thing where we had a null field in the catalog and we were publishing all of our prices were 0. And so basically took all of the detail pages down, made them unavailable. Fortunately, it was for the shoes business and we were losing money on every sale. And so like it was actually a CP positive outage, but the next catalog we were about to do was books. And I was like, shut it down, because we were going to publish all these books prices of 0, and we would have killed the books business. And so computers can be catastrophic. Humans usually are 1-by-1 defects, but nonetheless, we did a study of sort of some set of errors. We had 21 over a year. 19 of them were caused by human error. And so how do we remove the opportunity for human error, either by poke-yoking the system, by saying, like, let's make it so humans, nobody wants to inject errors, right? And so let's make it so they have the tools to do their job. Or by automating some of those things, and so the humans can do more high return, high value work, or creative work.
All right, that's it. I think we are at time now, and I would like to thank each one of you who took time to attend this event. I hope it was as valuable for you all as it was for me, and I would sincerely want to thank you, David, for coming here and sharing your thoughts.
Yeah.
I think like for everybody, right, who's watching this online as well, please provide your feedback. It really matters a lot to us because this is our first event, and your feedback is gonna help us improve as we go as we move forward. So yeah, that's it for today. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Nice to
Thank you for having me.